Number 26, the big lie technique. Big lie technique. Also, the bold-faced lie or quote, staying on message. The contemporary fallacy of repeating a lie, fallacy, slogan, talking point, nonsense statement, or deceptive half-truth over and over in different forms, particularly in the media, until it becomes a part of daily discourse and people accept it without further proof or evidence. Sometimes the bolder and more outlandish the big lie becomes, the more credible it seems to a willing, most often angry audience. Example, quote, what about the Jewish problem? Note that when this particular phony debate was going on, there was no, quote, Jewish problem, only a Nazi problem, but hardly anybody in power recognized or wanted to talk about that, while far too many ordinary Germans were only too ready to find a convenient scapegoat to blame for their suffering during the Great Depression. Writer Miles J. Brewer expertly demolishes the big lie technique in his classic 1930 short story, The Gostak and the Doshes. However, more contemporary examples of the big lie fallacy might be the completely fictitious August 4th, 1946 Tonkin Gulf incident concocted under Lyndon Johnson.
1964.
Sorry, 1964. What did I say? 66?
You said 46.
Oh, whoops. I'm dyslexic. 1964. Tonkin Gulf incident concocted under Lyndon Johnson as a false justification for escalating the Vietnam War or the non-existent, quote, weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, conveniently abbreviated WMDs, in order to lend this big lie a legitimizing military sounding alphabet soup ethos used in 2003 as a false justification for the Second Gulf War. The November 2016 US President-elect's statement that millions of ineligible votes were cast in that year's American presidential election appears to be a classic big lie. See also alternative truth, the bandwagon fallacy, the straw man, alphabet soup, and propaganda. Yeah, this one, I do find that super interesting that like the bigger the lie,
More
it's like
outlandish
it's
and nonsensical it sounds is somehow more powerful.
yeah, and I feel like there's a whole subsect of the American culture that if you can't find evidence for it, it actually emboldens their belief that it exists. You know? It's like example, like there's I haven't looked up the studies on my own, but I like one of the things that does kind of like tilt my head a little bit is when it's talked about how many criminals and rapists and like all these like all these negative, awful, terrible, horrible people are crossing the border and like literally like statements like raping our women and like kidnapping our
Yeah, it's just
children
like, where the
and
fuck are you getting this?
right. But it's like the way it's talked about, you'd assume that like there's this huge like explosion of rape, crime, and kidnappings happening close to the Mexican border. And to my knowledge, that's not, I don't think that's actually accurate. And I haven't looked at studies, but it's like, I'll put it this way. I've never seen any evidence put to my face that backs that up, but yet it's constantly cited all the time. And so that's one of those things that like I find really interesting when and like I want to be clear, like there's no there's no perfect orator, there's no perfect leader, there's no perfect anything. And so like everyone's going to have problems. And I want to be really clear when I say I don't think it's productive at all to constantly point at the flaws of certain leaders over and over again. That makes no sense to me.
Yeah, I'm gonna be super devil's advocate right now.
Yeah.
And Bernie Sanders uses this one, the top
Yeah.
1%.
Yeah.
He
Totally.
says that all the time. And I'm like, just because somebody has money does not automatically make them evil. Are they more likely to be
Yeah.
uh uh what do you call it? Not moral with the ways that they got that money? I'll concede to that, more likely than not, sure. But all of them just automatically, I that's a big empty statement that's unfalsifiable. So I'm sorry, just no.
Yeah.
Bernie Sanders uses
Yeah.
that one.
Yeah. So it's like to me I appreciate you saying that because it's like it's not I don't think it's conducive to always point at the negative things of leaders because it's like then what happens is if people are constantly pointing at the negatives of people all the time, especially if we're always pointing at the negatives of leaders, no matter who they are, like even when Joe Biden was in office and it was like, he's doing this wrong and that wrong and he can't speak straight and whatever. It's like when you constantly point at the negatives of administrations and leaders, what you do is you take away the possibility of them doing any good or of you being enrolled in them doing any good. And it's like that doesn't help anybody. It's like it's like you end up vilifying someone or something so much that if they went and did something positive, you would say, I'm not doing that because you said it and you're evil. And it's like, well, that doesn't help anybody. So all that aside, I just want to be clear that like for me, it's like that's why I'm independent. That's why if ever like you're gonna sit here and say Trump sucks and here's why, I'm not gonna get on that bandwagon. And I'm not gonna say, yes, I agree with you, and let's talk shit about him for an hour.
I can just say that Bernie Sanders sucks for a particular reason. Here's why too. Like
Yeah.
I'm not one-sided.
Yes. So, but what I'm saying is just for clarity for you and me, and also for the viewers, is like if I'm pointing out things that are negative, it's not because my position is that this person, this thing is all negative. But I am gonna say that, like, to me, that's one big lie that I've always been curious on. It's like when we talk about this like invasion from Mexico, I'm like, I don't I live in Texas. Like I don't know, like it's like I live in
Yeah,
I'm pretty
fuck
damn
it.
I'm not close to the border, but I'm drivable. Like I could drive there and I don't like here in local news or local situations. Like here's actually the truth is there was I don't know if he's been caught yet, but in Austin, Texas,
Just letting you know you're on the last like 30 seconds.
thank you. I got a text message from them saying that they're gonna be late, so I'm okay for a little bit longer.
Great. Okay.
I got a in Austin, Texas. And I don't know if they've caught this person yet, but there was a literal serial killer that was on the loose here and was killing people on Rainy Street, and like they were finding bodies in the river and all this kind of stuff, and they were suspecting it was a white male, and like, but anyway, like that kind of stuff, like I hear about, the serial killer in Austin. I hear about, the little things like this. It's like and now I'm being super biased because I'm like I'm a what's the bias we talked about earlier? The
Special
fallacy.
pleading.
It's no, not special pleading. It's the expert witness thing, um, where
Well,
it's
I was gonna
like
say that like I've seen so many crimes committed by white people, and like with guns, and people in the United States are like, oh well, they're just using their Second Amendment, and like that's fine. But as soon as it's a brown person does the same thing, they're like, how scary and how awful. That's special pleading. It's just fucking racism.
yes, I can't find it. Token endorsement fallacy. So I think I'm applying a little bit to the token endorsement fallacy at this moment by being like, I live near the border and I don't see this stuff, so therefore it's not happening. So I acknowledge that fallacy being applied, and being in this situation. But
Could also be the fallacy we just covered, the availability bias by
yeah,
just
yeah,
however much information you're seeing.
right. And I'm not deliberately looking for the truth, and I'm not deliberately hunting down the information, right? But so like also I'll acknowledging all of those fallacies together, what I will say is for my own independent experience, the big lie of the rapists and the kidnappers and the things that are coming over the border of Mexico, me personally, I haven't seen data that backs that up. And so there's a part of me that always has been curious about that and how and why that consistently seems to be this literal like staple speaking point in the current administration's thing, and that fascinates me. It fascinates me because I haven't seen the data, so it blows my mind that it's just accepted as fact.
So two things that's important for the audience to remember when it comes to like, hey, I don't see it, so is it really there? Absence of evidence does not mean evidence of absence,
Yes.
but also not having a reason to believe something is a reason to not believe it. That doesn't mean to say believe not. It means that absence of being convinced one way or the other.
Yeah. Yeah. Totally.
Agnosticism.
Yeah. So interesting. I think and what I like about like what we're doing here, I think it's inviting a higher level type of conversation, because if frankly, like if I was in a different situation, and we were having this conversation about these kinds of claims, it might have gotten more into an in-group, out-group bias situation or a group polarization situation where
Which are the
I
same
may have,
thing.
Right. But whatever, would have gotten more like fired up about like, yeah, there is no data. And then, would have gone in that direction. But it's like we're sitting here talking like, well, I haven't looked at the data. I haven't searched for it. Like I haven't hunted it down and looked up the statistics. So I don't know if that's accurate or not.
A really great position is to just say you don't know something if you don't know.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. So that to me is I think fascinating. It's one of those big lies that it's one of those things that is constantly stated that I personally haven't seen data for, and I've always wondered, is it real? Is it not? Um, yeah, I find that fascinating.
I, you know, if I have a question like that, I typically am like, you know what, someone's probably already figured this out. If I just Google it, I'm sure like I will find some sort of consensus on this. Most of the time I do. Sometimes it's a debate topic. So I find it interesting when that happens.
Yeah, I'm actually gonna look up ChatGPT.
I don't know
Curious.
if that's a great source.
Doesn't it scour the entire internet though?
I don't know enough about it, but I from science communicators that I have heard talking to people about evidence of stuff. Typically on the other side, where the person's arguing for absolute craziness, they will cite chat GPT and the scientists will laugh in their face and they will always say that's not a source. So I don't think that's a great source.
Okay, I won't look. Well, I'm looking right now, so I'll have to look somewhere
Google
else.
Scholar is a really great source. However, unfortunately, a lot of the language is used is so scientifically minded that it's kind of alphabet soup for us. That like
Yep.
yeah, we would need at least a bachelor's in whatever the fuck to understand the beginning of what they're saying.
Well, I've got a bachelor's in psychology. Maybe I can
There
use
you
it
go.
now on Google Scholar. Alrighty. Well, I feel good today. How you feeling good?
I am feeling great and yeah, very, very authentic today. So awesome. And yeah, I'm excited to get this through with you. And this is much shorter than the Bible, you know? So if we could get through that, then we could get through this, no problem.
Yeah. At some point, you mentioned that you read through the Bible. I'd love to chat with you about it because I've read the Bible also. So it'd be cool to chat on it at some point.
Yeah, that'd be dope.
Alrighty.
All right, I'll see you.